So I need to hit record. Okay, brilliant. Thank you. So the quick campaign that I was referring to, tailor-made. So we think there should be customized forms that can help you understand and tailor to different business departments. Because when you hit businesses with generic forms, it just gives them a sign that we don't really understand their world and we're not plugged into what's going on inside the business. To help, we've actually created two sample template forms, which you would have received earlier today in the L&D Means Business newsletter. But if not, I'm just going to attach examples for you into the chat. So you can take a look. And if you would like us to create more for different departments, so you may work with procurement, these two examples are for customer service and sales, marketing. So if you would like for other departments, please just hit me up and we'll get that across to you as well. Enough of that. We're going to head over to Molly. So the story was, when I first came across Molly, she wrote an article for a company called Sales Enablement Collective, and it was about the tech stack and how you can, use the technology in the right way. So every time I think of Molly, I say Molly Tech Stack, but actually her name is Molly Sestak, and so you'll forgive me if I slip up during the day. Molly,
I love that.
So Molly Tech Stack, Sestak. For those who don't know you, do you want to say hello and just tell us a bit about what you do? That's better than me trying to introduce you.
Absolutely. So, hey everyone, my name is Molly. As you can hear by my accent, I am American, but I am located in London. So I've been in Europe for the last 10 years. So I actually have no idea what it is to even work in the US because basically my entire adult life since I was 21 been over here, which is great. So I basically started my career as a business development rep. So BDR, SDR, where the people cold calling on the phones, grinding day in and day out. I wouldn't say it's the most fun job in the world, but it's really hard, really challenging, really rewarding. So started doing that for a company called Showpad. So they are a sales enablement platform. When I first started, no, I had no idea what a BDR entailed. And no, I had no idea what sales enablement was. So this was like a whole new realm for me. And I absolutely fell in love with, speaking with sales enablement professionals about their strategy and whatnot. I never even thought of it as a career because I didn't even know that that was a possibility. My dad works in sales, and I always said, like, I never want to be like my father, and I'm never going to work in sales. And well, here I am, more or less working in sales. So yeah, so as much as I was really good at selling and, I really enjoyed it. I think it's high risk, high reward. I didn't love it as much as teaching people how to sell and coaching people how to sell and building out these strategies to really make sure that the team is the very best that they can be. So I think that aligns a lot with L&D and a lot of the things that all of you are doing as well. So yeah, I kind of fell into enablement, had no experience besides cold calling enablement people and speaking with them every single day. And since then, I've built out quite a number of sales enablement functions at different companies of like different sizes. So I've worked at Okta. I'm now at a company called Sedna. I'll get into what we do later, but basically we sell email to maritime. So quite a niche market, really highly interesting, especially with the world events going on right now. But yeah, I've actually just recently shifted into a new role. So I'm working in business transformation, which is actually a lot closer aligned with L&D, I would say, almost enabling the entire business using my enablement skills. Although funny enough, last week, I've been asked to dip my toe into sales enablement again. The team's growing and they kind of need somebody again. So actually starting to consult different areas of the business on how to provide enablement. So it's not just all resting on me. So again, very similar to kind of what all of you do day in and day out, but with a different name and title on that. So that's me in a nutshell and like what I've been doing over the last couple of years.
It's such a fascinating thing. And you say dip your toe into transformation and go back into sales enablement. We know what that means. When I was first made a manager, could you just step up, be a manager for 3 weeks cover?
Yeah.
Fast forward 15 years, I became whatever, a senior leader. So you talked a lot about sales enablement, and today's conversation is all about what is sales enablement and what can L&D colleagues learn from it. The reason why we chose sales enablement as one of the four topics that we're going to cover as part of the L&D means business fireside chats. The other topics are speaking to strategic people inside L&D, people in sales and revenue enablement, and those outside of L&D. So for those who don't know what sales enablement is, how would you describe it? What role do you play?
Yeah.
And what kind of what's the transferable things that we can take away in L&D?
Yeah, absolutely. I think of myself when I'm doing an enablement role, realistically, like I think of my team as my customers. And I think you can kind of do that in L&D as well, right? Like the business is your customer and you're providing a service or you're acting as a partner to those customers. And in its simplest, easiest way of thinking about it, I think of enablement for sales or revenue teams as making sure that they have the right tools, the right processes in place, behaviors and skills and knowledge to be successful in the field. So whether that's having, the right content to hand when they're speaking with prospects and customers, like sales decks or customer stories or customer case studies, things like that. It also goes down into the tech stack, which is my favorite thing to talk about. And like how important it is to not only have the best tech stack that you can afford and what makes sense for your company, but also making sure that people know how to use it and it's set up correctly for the way that you go to market. And then that's not even considering the knowledge and skill piece. So how do we make sure we have really effective onboarding programs? So from day one, we're enlisting that culture in them, as well as, which I think is very similar to what like a L&D onboarding would be as well. So culture and all the knowledge and skills that they need within that role to be successful and to be successful within that company. So it's quite a wide range. I think in some cases, depending on the business size, it can be really niche. So I've had it where like my role was specifically just onboarding people or specifically coming in to just establish a coaching framework and coach the team, versus in other roles where I've pretty much been the sole person running everything, creating the content, doing the onboarding, from A to Z. So I think it really differs in a lot of organizations. I know like Kelly had said her title was go to market, whereas somebody else is like sales enablement. So that can also change depending on the teams that you're supporting as well. But I do think the elements and the building blocks and the skill set is so similar to what you would use in L&D. How do we roll out a training? How do we communicate that effectively to the business to do the change management and actually make sure 3 months from now, the thing that I launched is actually sticking. So it's funny enough, I'm literally consulting on a project right now to do exactly that. They were kind of marketing was like, yeah, we're launching a new way to go to market. And I was planning on doing a 30-minute training and handing them a document. And I was like, is it changing the way that people are going to have to pitch? And they were like, yeah. I was like, do you think we should run some role plays maybe? Oh, I never thought of that. So almost, like how do we gamify it, make it fun, enlist practice as well, which is I think one thing that probably L&D could pick up from sales enablement that maybe they're not doing because it's at such scale. Like how do we get the managers involved to make sure there is a level of practice for a particular new skill you're launching across the business and whatnot. So yeah, that's what I would say. So I don't know if you have any questions.
Yeah, there's a couple. I think there's one question, Megan, that you were asking, that your main experience is in revenue enablement or training, advertising, account managers and client services. Do you have any advice for someone looking to pivot to sales enablement, especially without sales experience, having come from revenue enablement?
Oh, I think that is a great question, Megan, because I think a lot of people are like super interested in kind of making that leap, but it feels scary because you don't maybe know much about the sales side of things. My biggest advice is like, I actually don't think that you need to have sales experience to be an incredible sales enablement professional. Sometimes like myself, like I would like to consider myself as a good sales enablement professional. And I do have sales experience, but I've also seen other people come from different backgrounds. And I think the main thing is having that intuitive kind of understanding of like how do I get people to change and make a change? So how do we, here's the problem. How do we then solve it? How do we then create a program for it, launch it, communicate effectively across the business, reinforce it, measure and follow up, and make any changes along the way as you see fit. And actually, realistically, L&D is kind of pretty well suited to be able to do that. And I do think you need to understand more about the business from the sales perspective, but that's a super easy thing that you can do by sitting on sales calls. Or if your company happens to have a call recording software like Gong or Kaya and whatnot, you can actually start listening to sales calls to understand what's actually happening during those, start sitting with salespeople, understanding what their day-to-day is. So I think you can learn a lot just by networking, shadowing, and listening to calls. If you really wanted to go the extra mile, you could probably take some LinkedIn learning courses or, look for some like sales enablement specific. SEC is actually great for that. They have a lot of like specific sales enablement courses, but you don't necessarily need it as long as you know how to kind of like launch an effective program, really.
So you mentioned some really awesome nuggets there. Thanks, Megan, for kicking us off with that kind of question. Talked about, shadowing, sitting
Yeah.
in sales calls. This is a very new thing, I think, for some L&D colleagues.
Mm.
Often I talked at the top of this call about training request forms. We often learn that through getting a training request very reactively, having a discovery session. The idea for some colleagues, please let me know in the chat if for those who are attending this session, whether you have been able to actually sit in on some sessions, watching other colleagues who you're serving carry out their duty. So they may be on a sales call or whatever. So let me know in the chat. I just wanted to get a sense of who actually does shadowing or sits in and watches and observes operation as part of your discovery process. I'd love to hear that. But that's quite different. So how new is that as a way of learning about the business? And what was it like for you when when you sit in on what are you kind of watching out for? How do you gauge? What are you looking for when you're shadowing or observing these sessions?
Yeah, so I'm kind of just trying to understand what are they doing. So for example, when I first moved to Okta, I was told that there was a problem with the way that we were using a piece of software called Outreach. And what Outreach allows you to do is have like email templates and cadences between phone calls, LinkedIn touches, emails. You probably have all received a cold email, probably all templated from a similar platform. But essentially, like the CMO was like, they're just not using it correctly. I'm like, I don't know what that means. I could have easily said, and I think a lot of people would have just been like, cool, I'm just going to run a training on how to use Outreach. But I was like, but that makes no sense because I don't know what the problem is yet. So I literally just had them sit there and I was like, just walk me through what you're doing. I think it does help that I have the sales experience that I was able to then pick out like, oh, that's not the most effective way to do this. I was pretty familiar with the platform. But I think just like understanding, asking them, like, why do you do it that way? Is there a particular reason? I think just staying curious and almost acting like a salesperson yourself. So salespeople are relentless with the discovery questions and just being genuinely curious. I think that's the best way. Like, don't assume anything, just ask. And most people are really happy to do this and network with you.
Yeah, I kind of once sat on some customer service
Hmm.
sponsors dealing with B2B mainly. So and what I was looking for, what I was told was the tone and communication, perhaps where our staff engage with our in business clients could be maybe different, could be more understanding, empathetic, listening to the actual request and responding to their
Such
actual
a good
request.
one.
And so I just wanted to know here for myself, is that the case? And B,
Hmm.
what's causing that? And so I can get a triangulation between three parties. So quite a few colleagues in the chat have said that they do something similar, shadowing once a month, perhaps. Doesn't need to be sales, by the way. It could be any department that you serve inside your organization. You also talked a little bit about, getting inside that enablement mindset. So,
Hmm.
you've also talked about transformation. Is transformation enablement and steroids, or what would you describe as the difference between the two?
It's interesting. So I think the transformation piece is the most important piece. I think a lot of times when people think about enablement, which is, by the way, not how I think about enablement, and I disagree, but to each their own. I think a lot of times enablement is like, we have a new piece of marketing content. And we always used to imagine when we were selling Showpad, you have this invisible wall between sales and marketing. And what they do is they throw that brochure over the wall and then they're like, hope it lands, hope salespeople use this and they know how to pitch it. I've done my job. Good luck, right? Because they're not thinking about the outcome, right? We're giving them the brochure, but how should they be using it? Who should they be sending it to? Is there, a particular use case that it should be used for? How should they speak about it? Should they be changing their original pitch? So I think there's all these things that trickle down, and this is just one example of a piece of marketing content, but I think that's the easiest way of thinking about it. And I think that's a really old school way of thinking about sales training. I almost think about it, like people would come to these conference centers and they'd sit and somebody would talk at you for 6 hours and be like, hope you learned something in your little workbook, right? I think about it now is like, that doesn't work. We're in this era where everything happens so quickly, so immediately. There's so many distractions as well. How do we keep attention? It's not having training sessions of 6 hours anymore in a room and we hit our training goal for the year, right? Like, how do we do bite-sized training, throughout the year to make sure people are constantly getting this information and reinforcing it, playing games, making it fun, which actually does hold people's attention a little bit more. People are also quite competitive, so they like to win. And especially if you add prizes to it, that makes it quite fun. But I think the transformation piece is like that next level of how do we actually do the change management piece and make sure people are actually able to do the thing, not just we launch it and it's done, which is kind of what I think of as like traditional enablement. And that's slowly changing, by the way. But enablement's still a fairly new kind of, I guess, like profession along with L&D. I would say like it's still fairly new concept to have these types of roles.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I often say we use these labels reactive and strategic or proactive.
Yeah.
I bucket them in two things. Ernesto and I were talking about this earlier today, actually. We were saying we want to bucket our L&D initiatives into two. One is BAU, business as usual. And the
Yep.
other one is transformational. So the BAU might have things like compliance, mandatory compliance training, your typical catalog stuff that people
Yeah.
buffet menu, go in and get whatever they want. And that might be in the moment, live, etc. Maybe looking a couple months ahead. But the transformational stuff is really what's going to take the business from here to there and figuring out what that is. Linking to that, you talked about KPIs and that you had to learn that. And if you're outside of sales enablement, you don't need to necessarily learn sales KPIs. But many of us in L&D who aren't in sales enablement do service and support sales teams.
Yeah.
What would be the kinds of but business as usual, Iris. Yeah, exactly. I should have clarified what BAU meant, but thank you. For those who aren't, so not familiar with the KPIs and the business metrics for sales and wanted to have a conversation with someone in sales and sort of demonstrate their business acumen, what were the kinds of things, you picked up around sales KPIs that were maybe new to you, unfamiliar to you, or just basic for others? But yeah, give us a sense.
Yeah, and sales almost like has its own language, by the way, with all the acronyms and stuff that they use, which can be really confusing. And if you work in tech, that's even double because then there's even more acronyms. I remember sitting in my first sales meeting as a business like BDR 2017, fresh out of uni. And I was like, what is this ARR, CAR? Like, what are we talking about here? I didn't even know what a KPI was. I was like, could we just explain this? Maybe is there a handbook I could read, a guide, maybe a little glossary? I think the biggest term is ARR. So annual recurring revenue. Other businesses might measure it in a different way, but it's basically revenue. So their revenue bookings, like how much money are they selling? This is the most important metric, I would say, for sales. Yeah, we're a software business, so we use ARR because it's always recurring revenue, but other businesses, they might just call it revenue. This is the most important thing. And that is realistically the only thing salespeople care about is hitting their target and getting their commission. Like it is not more like simple than that. Like it's not complicated. And so when you're launching things to sales and you're working with salespeople, some of the things to think about is they work on a quarterly basis usually. End of quarter for them, worst time ever that you could launch something, because again, all they're thinking about is, am I hitting my number? What do I still need to do? Right. So I actually just had to advise the business on this the other day, and they were like, "Oh, I never even thought of that." I was like, "They're just not even going to show up to your training. It has nothing to do with you and your training, but they're on customer calls. They have more important things to do. Like they're feeling like if they don't hit their target and they don't do what they need to do, like they're going to get fired. So this training, which to them is seemingly unimportant, is going to the back burner. So a few things to think about, and like I always bring it back to the why. So how is this actually going to help you hit your number? How is this going to help increase revenue, and drive towards those targets? So it's always kind of taking it back. Like you don't really need to know a lot about sales to be able to do that. And then a lot of the KPIs that I measure, it's quite difficult to talk about like conversion rates, which is a big thing in sales. Like, okay, we started with this number of leads that went into this number of, conversations, and like how it moved down the sales funnel, let's say. It tends to dwindle as you get closer and closer to actually selling to them. That can be quite complicated because yes, you might be influencing that by a program or a training that you've done, but it could be that they tried something new. It could be that, I don't know, the market is really great, so we're selling more. So it's quite hard to kind of put your finger on like whether or not you influence that. So think really simply, how many people came to my training? Think about running a survey afterwards. I always use almost like an NPS score, like how valuable was this training? And I use it for every single training that I do, so I can compare across different things that I've launched previously, and have almost just like a really easy way of measuring, did this hit or not really. So yeah, like measure the things that you can control. Did people show up? Were they active? How'd they do on the quiz afterwards? So like almost having like these pretty easy measurements that are in your control, versus some of these sales KPIs are quite difficult to measure. Like I'll be the first one to admit that.
And I think it's how we then connect the two. And I think part of that, and that's what we want to do in L&D Means Business, is help us understand the connection. So if, for example, we're seeing that, revenue is not where it needs to be, we then drill down and we say, okay, if we're servicing an Italian market with the same product and the UK market with the same product, are we seeing a dip in revenue in Italy or just the UK? So let's say it's just Italy. Now I've drilled down, but because it's so high level, we're not drilling down enough, I think, as a company and also as L&D professionals. So we say, okay, Italy, okay, where in Italy? Then we got it down to a particular city, a particular type of customer, and then you can drill it down. Then you can say, okay, which teams, because every BDR, sales rep, or support staff in any company, whatever it might be, we tend to look after a group of clients or customers in this case. Now you pinpointed the team. Now you know who needs the support. Then you need to figure out what kind of support they need to drive that revenue, which is so high level, we don't really understand how to see the connection. But if you drill it down and figure out who's responsible for that customer, for that market, and then who the team member is, then we can probably make that connection and drive it through. Because one of the things that we're trying to do, by the way, in L&D is move away from completion rates and attendance and stuff like that. And we heard a little bit from Amanda where you use MRR instead of AR, which is the same thing broken down, obviously, on a monthly basis. So parking sales enablement to the side, which was so useful in seeing the similarities and also the differences and what we can learn with an enablement transformational kind of mindset and how we might shadow. I want to talk a little bit about industry, because one of the things about L&D is we don't always understand the industry we operate in, and the market dynamics, and you and I were talking offline in preparation for this. I believe in order for us to become strategic business partners, we have to look outside the business. Looking inside is also important, but outside is crucially important because C leaders are only looking to respond to opportunities and threats in the business environment. So in preparation for this, you're going to help us understand as simply as possible what industry, who is Sedna, what industry you operate in, and what problem are you fixing?
Yeah, and I have a little slide that I'll share with some screenshots of our product to help a little bit. But essentially, we sell email into maritime. Super, super niche. But what I will say is one of the coolest industries I've ever worked in. Again, never thought I would get excited. I literally went to Barcelona like last year and I got really excited because I could see ships like off the coast as one does in a harbor. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's a ro-ro ship. And my friend was like, what are you talking about? And then I literally went on to the tracking system, which is, by the way, you know how you can track planes? You can also track ships. Fun fact. And I was like, oh, I was right. It was a ro-ro ship. It's going from this place to this place. It's carrying this. And my friend was like, whoa, that is a lot. That is, I don't know if I'm that interested in ships. Funny thing is, everybody at Sedna does this, by the way, and they get really excited about them because a lot of times they're our customers. So our customers are people who own the ships, also people who operate ships. So, and then the people who do the trades. So imagine you have let's say a whole bunch of, so Ukraine used to be the place for grain. So they have like a huge supply of the world's grain that they then trade to other countries and export it. We would be working with the people who actually execute on these like multi-million trades from like one country to the next, deal with the customs. It's been really interesting because most of them are freaking out about all of the tariffs that have come into play because it's really affecting shipping at the moment. And then we also work with the people who are called charters. And what charters do is they either are responsible for a commodity, so that could be a specific amount of oil or grain or cars, for example, that need to be shipped. And then they need to find a ship to ship it. Or vice versa, they manage a ship and have to find cargo for that ship. And it all comes down to profitability. So they are doing wild things. Like I didn't really know this. Like I sort of knew that international waters was a thing, but realistically, there's not like rules in the ocean. So people can do some dodgy things that is not really that like kosher to make money. I mean, it's like fine, they're like trading oil and stuff, but they're doing it in like such a weird way because they're not really getting taxed and whatnot because they're not doing it within a country. So technically it's not an import export. So some weird things that they're doing. There's also some dodgy things that some of our customers have done. There's a really interesting book called The World for Sale. And that kind of goes into it. Yeah, like actually shipping and maritime has a really heavy effect on politics as well. And like everything that's going on in the world, it's all interconnected. Because basically if shipping were to come to a halt, like the world as we know it would honestly cease to exist.
When like all of these unfortunate wars and tragic incidents happening, as we described earlier a little bit,
Yeah.
or alluded to it, someone in the C-suite, C leaders are tracking policy and what Trump is saying, which seems to us so far gone because we're not in that space.
Yeah.
But they know something's going to happen. They're immediately scrambling. They're doing contingency planning. Let's figure out different routes.
100%.
We as L&D colleagues, we don't need to be experts, but if we just have our antenna up a little bit, just to say, okay, well, this is going to impact the business. It's going to require someone to change the way they sell, how they sell. It's going to require some of our people teams, the way we onboard teams to be slightly, maybe we have to come to a halt with the team onboarding certain teams, and it's going to go on for a very long time. The company may start looking at cost reductions elsewhere, which again, as L&D colleagues, we need to be aware of how that plays into our own budgets and for budgets of other teams, etc. So I think there is a way sometimes to draw a line, between what's happening externally in the way you're saying. So clearly you've tried to understand your industry, and for me, this is really, really important. So I work in the housing industry now, on top of everything else that I do. And it's important to me to understand the dynamics in the housing market. If I don't, then I'm not going to be able to play an important role with my chief exec, who I report into. But you mentioned something really great. I try to get a really simple way of understanding things. Like I use metaphors. You used a great metaphor or analogy. You said, you know how you can check not manifest, sorry, check plane arrivals and their routes. You can kind of do that for ships. That's a great analogy because when we tap into what we already know, we're learning theorists, cognitive learning. When we tap into what we already know, it's easier. I also try to come up with one-line definitions for stuff. You described in one line the product that Sedna sells. Could you just say that again? And effectively, that is why the business was created, to solve that
Yeah.
problem and sell that product. So could you just talk to us a bit more about the product range?
Yeah, and let me now share my screen. So essentially, let me make it bigger. There we go. The interesting thing is I talked a little bit about charters, and charters are the people who match like grain with a ship or ship with different cargoes. And historically, what they would do is they would search and they'd scroll and scroll and scroll in their email and look at the hundreds and hundreds of emails in their inbox. And all these emails have in it is they're like information about ships. So it'll be like, this ship is however big, it can carry this, it's coming from this location to this location. And they have to find a needle in a haystack quite quickly to find, okay, a matching ship or a matching cargo. It's really difficult, by the way. These are actually people that are paid a lot of money because it's a very difficult job, high stress. They're going through like 6,000 emails a day.
Basically, essentially, you create a tool that speeds up search,
yeah.
makes it, in real time, quite stressful situations, allow people to search from it. But as you say, it's a very old tool. You're competing with Outlook. That basically
sounds horrible.
Yeah, so it says it all. I want to get to some questions in a moment from other colleagues, but
Yeah, absolutely.
so keep thinking of your questions that you might want to put out there. Some of you have already put it in the chat. My final sort of question for you, Molly, is what project have you worked on that has really driven sort of business growth and performance? And can you help us connect? What was it like before? What did you put in place? And how did you measure the ROI? I don't want to get too worried about isolation and could we prove it. I just want to make sure that we can articulate that this was happening in the business. So as a result, we did this strategically to drive the business forward. So even if we move away from being reactive and it isn't about training, can you do this training for us? We're trying to be like this as a business. Can you assist? That's a very different conversation. So I don't want us to necessarily think about ROI and isolation per se. I just want to say what was driven through a business goal for you. And sorry, feel free to stop sharing because I know this is now onto another. We've now moved on to another topic.
Exactly. So it's interesting because I'm actually working on a project right now that is super relevant for this. So the two things I showed you on the screen, those are two now different products that we offer. One is called Stream, that's our traditional email, and the other is called Pulse, and that's kind of the position lists or the more effective filters when using email. We also recently, in the last like 3 months, acquired a company, and therefore we acquired their technology. And so the business challenge was we went from selling just email platform, which we actually called Sedna, to now having multiple different products. And we're going for actually, we might in another 2 weeks have another acquisition. So we're doing quite a lot of acquisitions right now. How do we then revamp what our entire product portfolio or what they're calling marketecture? I don't know, this must be like a new name. I've never heard of it, but marketecture, which is like, okay, we have this like big brand on top. That's Sedna. That's our company. And it used to be what our product was called, but we can't do that anymore. So what the heck are we going to call our different products? How are we going to package them up? How are we then going to teach people to sell them? Who's going to be, where is there going to be people just selling one product versus another? So this is actually a challenge that we've been working on over the last like 6 months. We finally are actually ready to launch it. And it's interesting because if I hadn't intervened, they were actually just going to give a 30-minute presentation to the business and give them a document that had all the information. And as you can imagine, this is a completely different way of talking about our product. Like we're completely different branding as well. Like you could see that the one was dark, so that was black background, and the other one was light. And that's because they were trying to differentiate that they're two different products. So one of the things that we came up with, I did a brainstorming session yesterday. And it's like, okay, who needs to know about this? So first figuring out like, who's the audience? And we said there's actually two different audiences. We have the entire company, which is more from just like they just need to know this. It's just interesting for them. This is just basic communications. So we're going to do a high level 30-minute training for them. And it's going to just be like, here's what we're doing. We just wanted to let you know. Here's the why behind it. Like, you don't really need to change anything in your day to day, but this is probably just interesting information. And who knows, like engineers were actually asking about it because for them, it might actually be important to understand that we now have different products. So they're probably going to work on only one of those particular products. So there's kind of like, a little bit of a shift, but not too much. So probably a 30-minute training, with maybe documentation, good enough for them. Second audience is our go-to-market team or all of our customer-facing teams. For them, this is changing their whole world. They now need to relearn how to sell things. They need different sales decks, which means how do I use that sales deck? What's the almost script behind that, and getting them to practice it and be able to articulate it. So for them, we need something a little bit more robust. So we're going to do, they're going to attend that main high level session. And then we're going to do a deep dive session where we actually go into each of them. We're going to demo them. So it's going to go into a lot more depth because they're actually going to have to be the ones demoing these as well. Then off the back of that, we're going to do a quiz to just test, like, did they actually pick up the information and the key information? So it's not going to be like random questions. It's going to hone in on like 5 key things that we really need them to know. So simple quiz. And by the way, you don't need a tool to do this. We don't have one. So we're just using Google Forms and using a quiz. So it goes to show, even though I'm the tech stack lady, we don't always have like the perfect tools, but there's always free tools or using your existing tech stack to do this. So we're going to send out this quiz, and we're also going to have them do a situational role play. And this is going to be each of the teams. So BDR is going to have one, probably will be a cold call. Account executives are going to have it. It might be demo this product or, here are the challenges that they told you. Now, what product would you pitch and how would you pitch it? So actually having them do that, right? Like,
I love that.
really,
That's great.
yeah, really
If I understand, you're got now 2 or 3, 4 more new products. But that also particular needs of a customer, and what you're assessing in the role play is, can they pick up what the needs are and match the right product with the right customer?
Exactly. So like, not only is it like, okay, the quiz is just testing, did they pick up the knowledge? Now it's, can they articulate that in a safe space, in a very controlled environment, right? Where we know it's like, it's not too difficult. No one threw you a curveball. It's not a real customer conversation. So that's the second piece of the puzzle. Now, the third piece is, can they actually do it on a customer call? Because by the way, doing it in a controlled environment, not the same as on a customer call. So for that, it's a little bit more tricky, but we're very lucky in the fact that we have call recording software. So there's a few things that we are going to look into doing, which is actually tagging our core products. You can create tags of your core products. And then when they're mentioned, it will tag the call in the spot that they're mentioned. So we can then go back and have a listen and be like, oh, cool. Because it almost like timestamps them. So we can say, cool, that, this person did this call. Let's listen to see how they did it. Oh, they did a great job. Or, you know what, it's not really landing. I think we need another training session, or this particular person needs a little additional help and coaching. I think there was a question on
Yeah.
the situation. Great question, Megan. So it really depends on what your business looks like. In this case, we don't have an enablement person per se. I'm like the fake enablement person, but realistically, like I don't have time because I'm working on like so many different projects, more from like a project management consulting perspective. I don't have time to listen to 20 different 5-minute videos on pitching. I would love to do that because it's sometimes quite fun. So, what I proposed to marketing was let's work together and actually create a rubric so that it's really objective scoring. And then I actually wanted marketing. So, the same reason why I said all of you, I think it's good to listen to sales calls and whatnot. I want him to listen to those calls and see how they went because that will tell him, like, is the messaging landing? Does he need to make some adjustments? And I think then when he goes to launch something next time, he'll have a lot more insight into what the sales team is doing, how they actually pitch these things in their own words. And then I'm also going to have the manager do it because I think manager enablement is the most important thing. They actually need to see if their team is doing really well at something or not doing very well at something. And sometimes it's not enough for me to be like, this was their score. And they're like, I think they're pretty good. And I was like, their score was like pretty low. I'm concerned. So I think actually making them see it for themselves and score it and be quite honest about it is really
Yeah.
important.
What I love about the example is, if you take it back to the point I made, is that's not, this skills, which is handling multiple queries from a customer, matching customer need with product,
Mhm.
multiple product knowledge. That's not derived from a competency framework, right? Because many of us will work on a standardized competency framework as much as possible, role profiles, role skills. This is driven by a business need. We've acquired some companies that's expanded our product portfolio,
Yeah.
impacted go-to-market team. So that's what you've done. You've got it down to the team. And then
Yeah.
you're saying, what do they need in terms of to build their confidence, their communication style, their objection handling, driven by a business need. And there's two things that you could do there. One is you're getting it down to the individual level and saying how confident are they and can they sell products and match it? And you can give them, as you say, a safe assessment that they know where they're at and help them get them to where they need to be. Ultimately, though, the KPI, the leading KPI, is going to be, are we now selling product? Are we now making revenue across more product ranges? So if you found your main product was Sedna, now you've got product 2, 3, 4. And if you found actually our revenue is still coming 95% from Sedna,
Exactly.
then you know the training isn't working, right? Maybe it hasn't made it worse, but it hasn't made it better. When you
Correct.
start seeing, if it was me, I would find out it's 100% now from Sedna product. Our target is we want to start to get 30% of revenue coming across all of the other 4 product ranges. Are we starting to see the shift? And that's where you become very business minded, very strategic, which isn't about L&D. That's what I would be really fascinated. I know you're just at the start of it. Maybe we'll follow up. We've only got 5 minutes left, Molly. If it's okay with you, I'd love to just take more questions. If people have very specific questions, this has been so fascinating for me to hear. Very live case study without PowerPoints, and hopefully people have been able to follow through and have tried to sort of summarize as we go along so people can pick up on things that maybe we've missed. This is a chance if you had any very specific questions. I'll come back to Iris, your question on the AI bit, but I just wanted to see if there's any other questions you had about your role, your company, your projects and initiatives. That would be cool. So feel free to just keep them coming through. Shaira asks, how to find experts to train regional sales teams?
Hmm. Also an interesting one. Do you mean somebody within the business or almost like external training?
Yeah, external. Yeah,
Ex
because like the gap that we identified is like our sales team are very good and know what we sell and what is our offer, but the gap is like they do not understand what actually industry is offering, what others are doing. And in order to like to make sure that how to sell our offering better. So we
Yeah.
want to give them this industry knowledge. However, I'm looking for the experts in Australia, Japan, Italy, France, and I'm like, okay, how I should do this. Yeah.
Yeah. I start with customers because you might have customers in those locations. They're actually kind of like best suited because from an industry perspective, so we would just have like customer days where we would have customers come in and we would almost just do a panel, interview them like, what was your situation before? What was your situation afterwards? So easy to do. Customers love talking about themselves. Get them a nice little gift with like swag on it and easy peasy. Like, then the team loves it, by the way. They're begging me constantly to do it. I was like, guys, I don't work in enablement anymore. I'm not your girl. You got to ask your manager. Yeah, really, really good question. Actually, Kelly, I love that question. How do you get them to make time for training? It's kind of the similar of like, how do you get sales managers to make time for coaching? And I think for salespeople specifically, it's going back to that what they care about. And what they care about is hitting their target. So how do you make every training about and almost reposition it back to that why? This training is going to help you hit your target in XYZ way. And this is how it's going to do it. So I think it's bringing it back to that why. I also get them sometimes is like, I think Saad, you talked about like training request forms and stuff. I would ask people to send me, what they would want. I would also do my proactive analysis of what I think they need based off of me, seeing what's going on. And then I would kind of group them all and create some high level overviews of like a training on objection handling or communication or whatever. And I then would send out a survey or like a poll, and I would have people vote on the ones that they would want to do first. And so basically we know, right? Like I'm kind of leading that in a way, but then they're choosing which ones they're going to do first. They're still going to do them all. But by doing that, you're creating people that actually want to come because they've actually asked for it. And then when they still don't want to come, I'm like, but you asked for it. So I think you can kind of be quite direct and be like, but no, you told me you needed this training and you then voted on it and wanted to come. I think it's sometimes a cultural thing as well, but just making sure those trainings are as valuable as possible for them and getting feedback every time so you can iterate and make it better and more valuable over time.
And finally, the final minute, great question and answer. Are you considering leveraging AI to validate skills and help?
You know what, Iris, I would love to do it. I am not, I feel like this is where I start to feel old in my role. Like I'm not old, but the whole AI thing is like, it's quite scary for me. Like I'm not leveraging it as much as I should do. So like, if you have tips, please send them my way because yeah, I would love to.
We are leveraging this quite a bit. So if you want, I can drop my LinkedIn in the thing. Yeah, we're doing it across the L&D space, right? So in some of our e-learnings, we are, we're introducing dedicated chatbots so that learners are practicing in real time, particularly skills that fall into the enablement camp, right? So those soft skills, right? So, but then for a whole host of other purposes, skill validation and a whole other things. So I'm happy to drop my thing. I was just wondering if anybody else but us was doing it. So yeah.
No, we've cut back on a lot of our tech. Like we had tech that was kind of doing it in terms of like, it would almost auto score before someone submitted like a video role play or something, because it would score against a rubric you created. But unfortunately, we said goodbye to it, which was sad.
But this is the power of community. Thanks, Iris, for sharing your LinkedIn as well. And other people feel free to connect. So it's all about learning from each other as much as Molly has been awesome in hearing your story. Thanks for taking out the time. I know you've had a busy schedule. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining. And we'll see you at the next session. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, Saad. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Molly.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Yeah.